I signed on for 3 of these movies before I even did the first one. And that's a nervous thing to do, to sign on to scripts you haven't even seen. And so I was very eagerly awaiting the arrival of the script. And I got the script, and I read it, and my first feeling was a feeling of relief because it was good. And my next feeling was of excitement because I was excited to get to work on it.
There were a lot of contributors to the story of this movie. We had a lot of great writers, from Michael Chabon to Alvin Sargent, David Koepp, Mr. Gough and Millar. A lot of different people brought things to the story. And it was really finding our way through these different ideas to the ones that reverberated, for me, the ones that reverberated with me. We found our way. There was no real formula.
I think we were governed by certain givens. We know Tobey, and we know the age he is, and we know certainly the range, which is tremendous, that he can play. But it felt right to us that the next movie be about, okay, now he's accepted the mantle. He's been on that road for a while, and there are positives and negatives.
And we wanted to move on in a way that we still beat up Peter Parker. Peter Parker has to be beat up all the time, put to the test. Job, love, life. It's like real life.
It's never easy to do the right thing. So that's why I like the Spider-Man movie that we're making now, because it's about choices, and it shows, not like a message movie, but it shows how we can all make these choices. How will he weigh his personal needs against his sense of responsibility?
And Sam literally took this frame from the books, one of the biggest sagas in the Marvel Universe, and we felt that it's not easy to do in 2 hours, but we felt we really needed to go there.
The biggest decision was who was his adversary going to be. And we had worked on Doc Ock. We had worked on him as a character visually for the first movie. We talked about having he and the Green Goblin together.
But there was so much story to tell with the origin of Spider-Man, the origin of the Green Goblin. We really didn't think we would do the movie justice by having a third origin in there. Because he was a fan favorite, and we realized the great possibilities cinematically with Doc Ock, which are really obvious when you read the Spider-Man comic books. He does all these fantastic things with these mechanical arms. We realized we wanted to have him.
And there was the classic approach, which is Doc Ock, who is a revered scientist, developed this incredible thing, and what do we do with him? And that's on one hand. On the other hand, we had another storyline that, for me, thankfully, didn't go anywhere. And it was about Doc Ock, a younger Doc Ock, who is actually infatuated with Mary Jane and creates a love triangle. Some of us don't like love triangles, not like that, not with our main villain, and we went through a process. And I think we chose well. He is the ultimate enemy for Spider-Man, and that's why it's so interesting, because there's nothing Spider-Man can do that he cannot counteract.
It's wonderful to have a villain in the second picture where can see his face, see their face emoting, expressing whatever they're feeling. Alfred's a great actor, and we really needed somebody with that strong sense of reality and somebody with a sense of humor, which Alfred has. This character, Doc Ock, the way that Alfred is creating him, he's really a human being, a misunderstood man who becomes a beast.
I had a meeting with Sam, which was very general. We just chit-chatted about stuff. And it was all, I just thought it was like a meet and greet. I didn't really kind of give it much thought, because I didn't think for a second that I was really a serious contender for the part, because I'd never done anything like this before. I didn't have any sort of track record in this kind of movie. I mean, if you look at my resume of films, you wouldn't be blamed for walking away thinking, well, he's kind of like he does little independent arty movies. Every now and again he does a little studio thing here and there, but I've never played a part this big in such a big movie.
I think what I'm most gratified about is that for each character, there's an evolution. There's a furtherance of who they are and what their journey is, and there's suspense about where they're going.
In the first draft, actually, we had Harry put a prize on Spider-Man's head. We got rid of that because really it's more important for Harry and Peter to look at each other and Harry to say, if you knew who he was, would you tell me?
I think that's the secret of Spider-Man. In the first one and the second one, they really took time to develop all the characters and give Peter Parker's world away from Spider-Man a life of its own. And it's a touching story. And I think that's why Spider-Man's the best comic book movie around.
You have a superhero who is almost reluctant about it, and is actually having to debate with himself whether it's worth giving up a regular life to take on the responsibility of being a hero, which is really quite an interesting idea, and an interesting dilemma, which I'm sure we would all be interested in finding out, asking ourselves, well, if I had all these superpowers and I could save the world, would I give everything up to do that? And it's an interesting question to ask yourself.
Good stories show us the way. They show what is possible. And that's why I like this story so much, because this character is conflicted. He wants to be happy, but he wants to do the right thing. And it shows how you can take this journey as you mature and maybe have a little bit of both. A lot of times you don't have an idea for something, but you've got a deadline. And that fear is a great thing to work on you, on me specifically. I mean, I'm driven by it. Will I fail? Will I get it together in time? It's a great motivator to do some of your best work.
I think one of the really striking things about Sam, and maybe is that he's the audience. He watches the movie and makes the movie for the audience, and identifies with the characters, and is really thinking about the rhythms of the movie and how the movie's going to play for himself as an audience.
Got it now. Good. That was good. All right, that's a print.
Spider-Man and Sam Raimi are the same thing to me. It comes from him. It's his vision.
Kids come to this picture, and Spider-Man is their hero. And I'm not talking about because of the first movie. I just mean anyone you put in a superhero outfit and you play the heroic horns on the soundtrack, they are going to look up to as the hero. You just get that unearned. It's not fair, but it really is true. So you have an obligation to bring your character to the level that's worth their admiration. You get it without having paid for it. So the job of making the movie in some way is paying for it.
Sam, I need you to take a look at this and put your masterful eye to the choice of locations that we have.
All right, so let's take a look. Let's take a look with the audience. Let them help make Spider-Man. This is rehearsal of the end of the walk, the halt in front of the alley. Are you ready, mister? Great. Now this time, ready, and act. Okay, ready, and action.
And now for the main event. Give me the blue light, Rosie.
It's a very different, very unique way of filming. It's not like anything most of us get to do, really. It's much more to do with the technology. So you can't fight that. You can't sort of start. You can't stand in the middle of all this technology and say, I'm a bit worried about, why am I here? You can't really, you got to be serious about it, but you can't. You have to balance the elements of the job. It's a very particular way of working. It's a very interesting. I find it absolutely fascinating.
3, 2, 1, strike!
Oh, that was bitchin'. Let's do another one. Just because you can.
On a roll, let's go.
As the director of a picture, the crew is expecting you to know what you're doing and trusting in you to know what you're doing, to lead them. Everyone is really doing the work. It's just that the finished product is more in the director's hands than the other artistic contributors. And there are so many artistic contributors, from the actors to the grips to the electricians to the makeup departments to the hair departments to the wardrobe, everybody. So the fact that the movie did well made me feel great in the sense that I thought that all the people that worked on the picture for so long and hard must have thought that I had led them well, because the movie turned out okay.
I think that crew was the hardest working crew I've ever seen. And it was because Sam treated them well and treated them with respect, and I think they would have walked across hot coals for him had he requested it.
We were scouting, prepping, producing, and shooting all at the same time. The word balance is probably not the way to describe this process. We were on a timetable. Actually, the movie was supposed to be out in May.
I think the sense of community and one vision obviously has to come from the director. It really comes from Sam, who has a very clear vision and is a very good communicator of that vision.
He is willing them to life, concentrating, and now this one trembles and the other, and they start to rise up, up, up to the top. And now one or two of you notice the monitor, images of yourselves, and now he opens his eyes and steps down.
My smart arms are controlled by my brain through a neural link. He's very, very concerned with telling the right story and telling the story well. And so there's in both Spider-Man 1 and 2, I think there's a great balance between the huge kind of money shots and those moments of tenderness or moments of great intimacy.
He's not going for a conventional, love story, or you have to have those moments that everybody clings on to, but then he'll completely take you off guard in the next moment.
Any of the fans who thought that Sam Raimi was a sellout, has turned his back on Evil Dead and all the movies that he's excelled at and is known for, will finally have to shut their mouths, because it's like full-on Sam Raimi.
He's a very well-rounded director. He delivers very exciting visual images, but he cares a lot about the actors, and I've had a blast with him.
Action. Peter. He says to me, look, you're my partner in telling this story. You're my partner in building your character of Peter Parker, but I also trust you in telling the story of this movie with me. So if you have anything to say, any suggestions, I feel completely free to just bring up anything I want.
Yeah. No, I want you to do it the way I want you to do it. And you're gonna do it the way I want you to do it. When I say jump, you say what color?
Well, Sam, you're telling me that as if that's something I don't know. As if something's changed. I've gone through your abuse from the first picture, and here we are in the second picture. Once again, you're the puppet master. I'm the puppet. You're pulling the strings. Okay, Godfather.
I can see it my way.
I hear them sort of teasing each other a little bit and smiling and giggling a bit between them. They've obviously reached a very deep understanding of how to work together and a deep respect.
I'll tell you something else. The performance isn't good enough. I want some real quality acting in this picture. I want something like Bruce Campbell did.
Oh, shoelace.
You might want to... For me, the whole thing is very amusing, and it's been fun to watch, because why not have a guy who made, Evil Dead for $350,000 do Spider-Man? Because that's the guy you want, not the guy who's used to having everything all the time. Give it to someone who's used to doing a bunch with nothing. Now you give him something, and you can... I think it was a good choice. It was a good match of material, because Sam's always been a comic book guy.
Action. All right, let a picture of a rancid chicken, food poisoning scare, Sweet City.
The first movie Sam and I did together, I think we very quickly felt very comfortable together, and
it gets, more and more fun, and it's like, going to a reunion, every time I get to work with him again.
It gives me a great sense of stability, and I know that certain scenes will work because I've got these particular actors in it.
When we got back into the Daily Bugle, it felt like going home again. Because this guy brings in an element of this movie that everybody fell in love with in movie one, and everybody wanted more.
Miss Brandt, give me a violin. I think it's all there in the comic book, really. I mean, obviously you can't hear it, but the bluster is all there. The look obviously is there, the hair, the mustache, and all that.
I was afraid some people might think, oh, it's going to be too broad. I had heard that when I was shooting it, but I always found him funny. He's just a great actor. Seems to always have the right stuff for the right scenes, no matter what parts he's playing.
He means a lot to me because I always wanted to play J. Jonah Jameson. I wish they had made the movie 30 years ago so I could have. But I always felt he's my favorite character. I love J. Jonah Jameson. And I got to tell you that he plays the role, I hate to say it, better than I could have done it. I mean, he is wonderful. He has captured Jameson perfectly.
It was a throwback almost to those, the 40s, the 50s, that kind of, fast-talking newsroom, chatter. And I spent a couple days at the New York Post and obviously a much more contemporary setting, But that vibe of that sort of, hectic, especially as the deadline nears, as you get later in the day, the activity level gets really amped up, and that style just sort of seemed to lend itself.
We got 6 minutes to deadline, John. We need page 1.
The dean of the university's furious.
Why?
Your article said that he wasn't even fit to teach kindergarten.
Sam is, to a large degree, an actor himself, though he doesn't really act, but he acts in his mind. In other words, he sees, I think he sees the characters that way, it seems to me. So then when he gets to set, he's got an idea of the rhythm and the pace, and he just plugs the actors in who can do that for him. So when he arrives on set, we just get sort of plugged in, and it works quite nicely.
The advantage of working with people that you know is that you know what their abilities or disabilities are, and you know how to work with them. The bad news is that, now that Sam's got the guys sometimes that he wants, he can bring them in. He also feels that he can browbeat them now too.
Bruce said, Sam's great, except he's got this strange thing for verbal and physical abuse, and he beat Bruce with a stick.
See on your marks, man.
No, Bill,
Me.
Sam doesn't hit me or verbally abuse me quite as much as he did before because there's too many people standing around now. If your crew is only 6 people, you can do whatever you want to the lead actor. And no one's going to tell.
Any time that Sam can throw something at me, he will.
Filming is not a democracy. It's a benign dictatorship. And the boss is on the floor. The boss is the director. And the director sets the tone.
And you're going to do it like I tell you to do it, you can get off the set. Also, you mess this up again and you're off the set. That is the weirdest slice removal I've ever seen.
I know, it's weird.
Now, what on earth are you doing up there?
Okay, so... Sam, I won't be spoken to in that manner.
You're talking back to me? If I hear the word sorry again, you will learn the meaning of the word sorry. Look down, readjust the pizza for eating, raise it. That's it. All right, and no mugging.
Gotcha.
All right, here we go.
His attitude and his professionalism carries everybody through the whole shoot.
Grant is going to make sure everyone has a piece of cake, and the amount of time that it takes to eat those slices, he will duly deduct from your paycheck.
I think, maybe over the years he's really matured, and over the course of his career, we've seen him go from this kind of the horror genre, and then can make a movie like Simple Plan, can make a movie like Spider-Man.
Sam explained it pretty good making the first one. We were shooting the ring sequence, and he turned at one point, he goes, we're doing the same gags, but we just have a lot more money. It's nice that he can finally have the support. So if he goes, I got this crazy shot that I want to do, now he's got all the trained professionals in Southern California to go, okay, how can we make this happen? It's nice that the guy with the big ideas finally gets the toys.
Fire in the hole. Fire in the hole, propane.
In times gone by, we were called special effects men. But since the digital age has come about, they've broken it down to visual effects and special effects, which is really digital work, which is done in a lab, and the mechanical special effects, which is done live on the set. You need live elements so that the actor can work with things. And the actor just can't work against a blue screen or a green screen all the time. He won't get the feel for it. We have to match all the elements. Anytime somebody's falling off a building, we create that wind. Everything you see in the air, we will put in the air.
See, the scene required, Sam wanted a lot of pollen in the air, but the problem was that because we came here, it wasn't quite spring yet. We had to look for this stuff. And what we found, the best thing for pollen is it's actually belly button lint. And we've been collecting this belly button lint now for about 4 weeks. We always thought that New York was just, you know, like you hear a lot of things about New York. What we found is that New York is actually the belly button lint capital of the world. This is about 3 weeks of belly button lint from New York. We hope we have enough for the shot.
Anything that generally will move, we are responsible for. The construction department will build the set, but then it is our responsibility to make that set move.
Come on. Ready, and action. He picks up Spidey, and he's aware of it. Wait, stop, throw, and hit.
I kind of have a rule of thumb where if it's shot within 15 feet of a 15-foot range, it's pretty much going to be live. Anything past that is pretty much going to be digital.
Cut.
The fire on this one was almost 3 times as big as the first one. We shot the first one in New York City, and we were pretty limited on what we can do there. Although the fire department was a big help, we did the second one on the back lot at Universal. So it was pretty much we built the set to burn.
No one in this area other than stunts and effects. Okay.
There's air mortars inside to accentuate the blast with debris and a little bit of wind. And there's a little bit of sparks coming out with the doors for Sam. And it won't be too noisy. No ear protection inside, but out here we're all fine.
The burning building was a very special set of needs that we had to fulfill to accommodate the shooting crew and to accommodate John and to provide a set that was safe for everybody to work on. This is the before picture. This is the back lot before it has any of the work we're going to bring to it. No signage, no awnings, no detail of any kind. This is a part of that same block as we'll represent it in the movie with the building on fire. We're going to add all the awnings, the traffic lights, the clocks, the fire escapes, the gratings, the signage. These aspects of New York City will be added in digitally after we shoot our first footage.
Hey, Mark. All right, let's go. Mark. Hey, Mark. Okay, clearing, and background action, background, action.
Help! Help! Fire! There's people in there!
The burning building was a completely different problem. We actually had a building on the back lot that we liked very much, and what we found was that the construction technique on the back lot was fiberglass and wood, and both of those things would have not held up to the intensity of the fire. We actually clad the entire existing building with a duplicate, a skin of the same building made in plaster and backed with drywall. We skinned all the existing surfaces with drywall. We installed metal awnings, metal grates on the windows, and replaced all the wood frame windows with metal duplicates of the windows. And then the special effects team came in and rigged their burning bars and burning units and protective shields so that the rest of the building wouldn't catch fire.
What we've got going on here is, this is what we call our fire pan. And what this does is this directs the flames out of the building. Without this pan being on there, the flames would come back into the building and up through the ceiling. And what you can see is this is just a movie set, so we have to protect the set itself. What we have inside of here, where this pipe is leading to, is what we call a fire bar. It's a piece of 3/4 inch pipe, and what we do is we slot the pipe with a saw, and the propane will enter through here, and it'll come out and create that fire for us. And what we'll do is we'll set a level that the director likes, and then we'll pretty much maintain that level throughout the course of the night. What these are here, these are our main control valves, and what we'll do is we'll have a preset with the director, and when the director looks at the fire, he can determine what he likes, and then we will adjust the fire to change the height and the configuration of the fire so that all the windows don't look the same. So that it looks like it's hotter, it's maybe not burning as much in one room as in the other one, so it doesn't look like a theme park ride. The principal actors, they don't have a chance to come on the set up until the time we shoot it. And so when they come on the set, we pretty much want to give them a walk through the whole scenario and say, Tobey, this is exactly what's going to happen. And then what we'll do is we'll bring up a little bit of fire and make them comfortable. What we're looking at here is what we call a propane mortar. We will fill this accumulator tank with propane, fill it up to, and then we'll charge it with about 125 pounds of air. And then on a cue, as Tobey or Peter Parker comes through the door, we will blast this, and what that's going to look like is a little explosion has happened inside the room.
It's scary when you send an actor into a burning building. I mean, the first thought that crosses your mind is, I hope that CG version of him is pretty good. The Spider-Man that Jim Atchison created for this movie is very similar to the one he created in the first movie. At least it will seem that way to the audience.
This second costume, while it has details that are different, and the colors are slightly different, I mean, you need to be a real enthusiast to spot the differences. It's a great opportunity to have a go at something again. I mean, this costume was probably the most difficult thing I've ever... It should look very simple and slightly naive. Here we were trying to do something which was about really an acrobat who had this unbelievable kinetic, spiraling ability. So it had to be a very flexible thing. We went through a huge, long, circular trip in terms of developing the costume of Spider-Man. And over a 6-month period, we came back to believing that we had to sort of respect the icon. And in fact, the closer and more truthful we were to the image of Spidey, as long as it moved properly and it didn't wrinkle too much, and the stuntmen were able to do their somersaults and the CGI people could recreate it, then that was the way to go. This time we're making 35 suits, and we've developed a new way of making them with a sublimation printing process, which isn't quite as good as the silkscreen process, but we save a bit of money and we save a lot of time. The first thing to do is always employ people that are cleverer than you. You're only as good as your own team. So I have a great assistant called Paul Spadone, who worked with me on the last film.
We've been working for the past 7 months, 8 months now, sort of revisiting Spider-Man's costume from the first film and updating it and enhancing it, and doing a lot of work with the color of the suit and the printing techniques. The pieces that you're seeing here, we have a whole rack of them, represent a lot of the trial and error of our development and research early on. Each one of these pieces is a silkscreen piece of the suit, and each section of the suit is hand silkscreened in New York by a team of artists there, and each area of the suit requires about 6 screens. A lot of what we did this time around was try and bring a greater depth to the color and a richness to the color. And I think that you'll see that the reds this time around have a a real boldness as well as the blues.
There's a spider that we redesigned, that Jim redesigned on the back, that now has a more elegant, flowing lines that work in more harmony with the back of Spider-Man.
If we went with a wider format, he's even going to get smaller in frame. I mean, the way to photograph him now is like this. And there's going to be a lot of room on the sides of the frame, even for a medium close shot. Before, you could make his image much bigger. I mean, the problem is exacerbated if we went widescreen. Right. We're not decided on that. That's the potential problem. The next problem is the graphic difference that we're now talking about, making, in this case, I remember it blended in exactly. It was easier when a shot had to break it. You had to cut off the legs. Occasionally that happens. You had to accept. But in this case, because it makes such a dramatic statement against the wider webbing, it's going to be slightly more offensive to break the graphic a little bit, because we're saying it stands out, and then we're saying, but we're cropping it. So that's the second
Do you
factor.
want to try something this size, that design?
Well, we're just bringing a smaller one now.
Let's just
we're getting a
reduce-
smaller one side.
Well, we'll see. Let's see if 80 works.
Not bad.
75. You getting this, Scott?
Yes, I am.
Is this enough?
75 looks pretty
Not
cool.
bad.
The whole, zoom back each time and see what the whole.
Try 80. Not bad.
show me his
Sam, does
face?
that help your problem at all?
Show me his
Or
face
still
with
the
it.
same problem? That feels big enough
Well,
to me.
I don't mind it a little bit smaller than the 100%. I will say
That's
that.
80. That's not bad.
80.
This is the new spider that we have on the front, which is great new design. And on the back, both of them are in applied latex.
This is one of the first designs that came to us here at the end of the R&D period. And from Jim's design, we produced molds which allowed us to produce a variety of urethane spiders in varying thicknesses. The favorite thickness turns out to be this scale, which is also the same scale as the surrounding webbing. The benefit of this is now that the spider is more integrated into the costume. Instead of it being a flat printed logo on the back of the costume, it's now raised, and it's going to tie in a little better to the surrounding web. One step we've gone even better beyond this is, and again, it only exists in a mold stage right now, was to have a custom metal mold made. And we've taken the spider emblem, but we've added the bevel surface all the way around the edge. So in cross section, instead of it just being a rectangular raised piece, it's now got a bevel. It basically matches the same bevel, the same angle that's on the spider web. So it's all very congruent now.
This is the web separate from the suit. And each piece of the suit comes to us, or like this, and then it is glued by hand onto the fabric, laid flat, after which it is all sewn up and put together as a complete suit.
The last time around, one of the big problems, challenges to figure out was what type of material to make this raised webbing out of. It had to stretch with the spandex, and yet it had to have enough structure that it looked like steely, hardened, tough material. So after some testings with urethanes and silicones and some other materials, we landed on foam latex, which had the right kind of properties to give Jim what he was looking for. This is shows you what the a basic piece of webbing looks like when it comes out of the mold. This is the Spider-Man 1 technology. The improvements we've made this time around are that we have, by using a backing on the mold with a special gasket material, and this is a negative mold, we're able to produce pieces that have a lot of this flashing gone. For instance, this piece here, you can see has much less flashing on it, and that eliminates some of the trimming work.
We have made subtle changes in terms of the elasticity of the muscle suit and the movement of the false jaw inside the hood of the costume.
The improvements that we made, they're seemingly slight, but they're all more about performance flexibility of the suit rather than the appearance. The biggest difference is that we've separated all of the muscles into separate units as opposed to the muscle suit from the first movie, which had a lot of overlap of muscle material, which is just foam rubber, which bridged all of those muscle groups. Now, again, even though this is very flexible and supple, the improvement of doing it this way is that it allows more of this finely knitted material in between to give it more stretch. So conceivably, well, definitely there's going to be more movement as the performer is inside the suit. It also allows the suit to fit down a little snugger down in between the valleys, and hopefully it will give you a little more definition to the musculature.
Over here we have the various incarnations of helmets. The idea was to come up, as far as the understructure of the helmet goes, we wanted to come up with a new way, a better way to lock the eye frames into the helmet. And we also wanted to add a little bit of flexibility to the jaw. So all of these were various types that were tried and prototypes put together. Jim chose a couple from that, and we moved forward off of his selection.
Underneath this, if it was not the reveal mask, would go the undershell mask. And the undershell mask goes on before the head gets pulled over to give a little structure and design to it. And changes, these were just made for a little more talking. This time there were some changes to the eyes and how the frames go in, convenience-wise and look-wise. The lenses, obviously they don't want to have the lenses on at all times. You want to make it quick and convenient to put the lenses in and out. So the lens is it's a casted urethane and a few little airbrushing things to it. And what it does is it'll go in to the suit, magnetically lock in. And obviously between that would be the fabric.
Another change that was made to the suit this time around was the webbing on the glove, especially on the palm, which was not there on the first Spider-Man. It's drawn in a lot of different ways in the comics. Sometimes it's just a series of straight lines running across the hand. Other times it's more of a grid. But what we chose to go with is this pattern, which comes down here and follows sort of the general natural shape of the hand.
By the time we get the fabric in its printed form, to the time it's got all its bits inside and outside, it's 3 weeks. It's longer than that. It's 3 to 4 weeks, a suit.
There's an entire shop that sews the suits and glues all of the webbing down. There's another shop with its team of craftsmen fabricating the webs, painting the webs, fabricating the eye lenses, painting the eye lenses. And we also have another shop in New York who's done all the silkscreen printing. So it's a huge enterprise with a lot of people spending a lot of time and putting their talents towards it.
It's about finding the essence and supporting the characters. And, you know, I've done a lot of what I'd call the look at me school of design, you know, where you're dressing people in big flashy outfits. This is one flashy outfit that somehow had to kind of work.
When you sign up for a movie like Spider-Man, you're essentially like signing up for the military, or it's like a jail sentence. I had just wrapped up Spider-Man 1 like only a couple months prior, and I didn't think I was going to be coming out until maybe a month before production. But they shot some background plates for the big train sequence in Chicago, and it was just a huge mountain of footage, you know, hours and hours of 35 millimeter in Vista and you know, all kinds of different formats. And he just really wanted to get a jump start on basically sort of assembling the scene, starting with the background plates and then incorporating, you know, previses and animatics and stuff that they had already done. Sam actually started planning the scenes even as we were finishing Spider-Man 1. He was gearing up. We hadn't had a script yet, but he knew of some certain set pieces that he wanted for the movie. So even at the point that I came on, there was already quite a few storyboards, hundreds of storyboards, and some of the major shots had already been sort of prevised out in, rough computer or, like animatic form, taking the storyboards and like making moves on the boards. So the first thing I did was I took the scans of all the storyboards and everything else and just basically started building the sequence together as if it was working with dailies. And by the end of the first couple of weeks I was on, I had like, a 10-minute long sequence cut, which was like a full reel of the movie. That cut basically was used to try to figure out what we needed to do in terms of shooting. It's crude, but you really get a feeling of how the scene is working and progressing. So you can do a lot of planning before, like storyboards are for it, kind of plan it out on paper before you actually commit to shooting things and, and spending the money. And then, of course, when you shoot it, a lot of things change. And you can't be too slavish to the animatics or storyboards because, the actors come up with stuff on the set or the stunt guys come up with different bits of business, or, of course, Sam, But it's just, it's a good start for any scene. I've known Sam for years, and, we share a lot of the same tastes in terms of a love of horror and a love of suspense and a love of, making the audience jump and scream. And just, just a desire to sort of put on a good show for the kids. Part of the fun process of working on a movie like Spider-Man 2, or even Spider-Man 1, that it crosses so many genres. That, on one hand it's sort of a drama, and on the other hand it's a horror picture, and, it's an action movie, and it's a comedy, and it's sort of every genre. Well, what was nice about the horror scene is I think that the studio went for it, especially in a movie like Spider-Man, for it to take such a kind of a dark, gruesome turn. And we were worried, of course, that it wouldn't get a PG-13. And, there's no blood, but it's still pretty intense, And it's cool to, getting the first guy to see those dailies, You get the dailies and there's a lot of cool zoom shots on screaming faces and, the old chainsaw coming up into frame and, this kind of classic trademark Sam Raimi shots. So, it's cool that, he's able to pull all that stuff together that he loves and, do it in a huge movie like this. You always have to be aware of what you need to tell the story. I think it's more important to, that every shot in a sequence services the story and tells the story to its best way possible. And, sometimes they have a maximum amount of impact. The shots need to be short, and I don't really see it as a stylistic thing as much as just sort of figuring out what's best for that given moment of a scene, what'll give the shot the most impact, or that part of the sequence. It's keeping the story moving and keeping everything super clear, crystal clear, within any given shot or moment. And then when you're in a dialogue scene, I think the most important thing in a dialogue scene is knowing when not to cut. I mean, the nice thing when you're working with really great actors is you can stay on them, and you can let a shot play out. I mean, there's a scene in this movie where Tobey's basically confessing that he feels he's responsible for the death of Uncle Ben. And the shot of Tobey with his speech was most powerful without any cuts at all. I mean, there's, I think, one cutaway to Aunt May at a certain point in the scene, but otherwise it's just, a minute of Tobey just basically telling the story. And it's nice when you can do that. And then you can just study the actor and the nuances of his emotion and performance. When I got in the footage for this montage, which it comes at a point in the movie where, Peter Parker has had so many bad things happen to him, and he's just so held down and so miserable for so long that he can't take it anymore. And finally, he just gives up being Spider-Man, and he's free and doesn't have any responsibilities and can just live life as a normal human. It was like the first piece of music I went to for whatever reason. And I cut it in, I put the scene together, and I didn't even really cut the scene to it. And I went home and got the CD. I thought, I'm going to put that raindrops keep falling on my head because it's just like the epitome of these kind of scenes. And for some reason, it just really worked. It caught all the cuts in some magical way. I mean, there were a couple cuts that I needed to adjust a frame or two. But pretty much the version of that scene that's in the movie is like the very first cut of that scene. And it feels like a huge amount of weight has been lifted off the character. And for the first time in his life since he's become Spider-Man, he's just truly free and has no worries in the world. I hope it's going to be, introduced to a new generation of moviegoers who can be tortured by it as much as I was when I was a kid. Sam actually we work pretty closely together. And especially on a big effects movie like this, the sort of nightmare of it is that it never really ends. I mean, on most movies, the footage gets shot, and at that point you have a finite amount of material to work with. And you're sort of working with the same dailies over and over, just basically honing it down, trying to figure out the best takes and the best performances and, the structure of the scenes. But when you're done shooting, you're far from done, because there's so many visual effects shots that are constantly evolving and changing that every day we would have a 2 to 3 hour visual effects meeting at SPI, Sony Picture Image Works, which is our effects company, where we would see anywhere from 20 to 60 shots, all in various states of completion, from like rough early previses to beginnings of lighting and so on and so forth. So we were constantly having to give feedback on those shots. Every day was like getting new dailies. And then having to bring back those 20 to 60 shots, cut them into the movie, and see how they worked, within the material that we already had. It was incredibly important to have a good visual effects editor. And Jody Fidel, who I've known for years, is a fan of all this kind of stuff, and is just somebody who is, totally in love with his work, and obsesses over effects.
Bob would be cutting, but effects were always coming in, so I would have to put together a sequence. I'd take one of Bob's sequences, cut the newest shots in, go to set with the tape, and show it to set on Sam in between setups. He'd give notes, I'd take notes, I'd get them back to SPI and John Dykstra.
And seeing if they worked okay, or whether we needed something different, whether Spider-Man was too fast, or the action was too slow, or the framing was right, the movement within the shot to cut from, shot number 1, which was a shot we already had, and shot number 3, which was a shot we already had, and this was the shot in the middle. It was a great crew, and everybody just really worked together and just cared about making the movie the best it could be. Surprisingly, there was very little footage that wasn't used. There were just a few dramatic scenes that we thought would be better shorter. Scene in the backyard between Tobey and Kirsten, where they have sort of a romantic interchange that we always liked, but we felt it was within the pace of a summer action movie that it might be too much. So we pulled footage out of that, and there are just a couple other scenes. There's another scene between Peter Parker and the Russian girl who lives next door, the girl Ursula. It's a scene I always liked, but it didn't really fit into the end of the movie. On a movie like this, there's no corners cut in terms of, getting what you need to do the job correctly, and then everybody sees it. So it's really gratifying on that level. Just being able to go to the theater when the movie opens and hearing the reaction of the audience, which is, kind of what it's all about,
Our, if you want to call it a mantra, really was that the worst shot in the new movie has to be as good as the best shot in the last movie, because there's always a worse shot. And the challenge, of course, is that not only has Spider-Man raised the bar over the course of the intervening years, but other movies have come out which have been incredibly successful and had some beautiful and spectacular technical breakthroughs. The challenge for us is that we have a moving target, and not only is it a moving target, we have to project into the future how high the bar is going to be. It isn't just about a bar that's sitting here today. It's about a bar that's going to be a certain height when we release this film.
Well, we started where we left off in the first film, which is daunting, because I think we were really successful with the things that happened in the first film, both visually and storytelling-wise. We had a new villain, a very good villain, I think a very challenging villain, and we also had to show our character in the flesh.
Doing the data or the photo acquisitions that we did on Tobey Maguire and Alfred Molina both had to happen very early on. Building those two characters for the movie they're two hero characters for the film, and to be able to do the shots for the movie, we need to start by building the characters and having them ready to put into shots. So it was probably one of the first development efforts that we had to embark on.
John worked with Tobey Maguire, I worked with Alfred Molina, and we essentially directed them in facial performances of different ranges of emotion with motion capture.
We measured every inch of their body. We cyber scanned every inch of them from head to toe. We did a lot of motion capture on their movements, facial expressions, how they open and close their eyes, how they smile, how they frown, pretty much all of the range of emotions that we could get. We had them read lines from the script so we could capture performance of how they might say different lines of dialogue. Pretty much anything that we could capture in terms of photographic elements or data elements through motion capture, we did.
And then we took that data and applied that to the CG model so that every time you see them in a fight sequence, if you stop and you go through slowly, you'll see all these different facial expressions on the characters. The shot that's probably has to be, the proof in the pudding is the one at the end when they're in the pier and Doc Ock pulls down the fusion machine and the crescent's down into the water and essentially drowns himself. The camera has him, he's full screen. And he's all CG, everything in the shot is CG, and he drifts away down into blackness ultimately.
We had discussed the potential of having Alfred do this underwater fall away, okay? It became cumbersome at best. So we decided to make the character into a computer-generated character. And that was one of our big challenges in the making of this movie. This is a close-up. We have to actually make believable Alfred Molina, Doc Ock, in the flesh, in this close, at the beginning of the shot, and take him away from camera. And add to that, he's got to be underwater, which is kind of a unique deal.
For the fusion device, we knew it had to be a strong visual image that conveyed a lot of energy and a lot of potential energy. And there's a line in the story where Alfred says, "I've got the power of the sun in the palm of my hand." And we used that as a springboard for our inspiration. What we did is we looked for a lot of reference photography of the sun. And what we found is that when people photograph the sun, you get these fascinating images that are really not blown out like we traditionally see the sun, but show a lot of the detail of the gases on the surface of the sun. And so we used those as a guide and ended up building up from the surface and out to the gas prominences.
Well, they're going to do shot 74, which is this wall here imploding into Ock's machine.
This particular miniature shot is complex in that we have a number of practical effects that are working with the miniature photography as well. And since you're on a small scale, this is all done in quarter scale. And because it's so small, everything has to be in a very condensed area.
What you can't tell by looking at the model out there on the water is that it's actually up on a steel platform supported from below the water level. And so during the shot, the building's going to sink down some, and the walls are going to, Ock's machine inside is going to lash out, and the energy slice through the building, and then the building will suck in.
This is a shot and really the whole sequence which combines both miniature photography and CG work. So they're not separate of each other, they're combined. And really one of the arts in visual effects now is understanding photographic means and computer means and how to blend them together. And that's really the best way to get the most dramatic effects.
It was decided that there was going to be an elevated train sequence in this movie. And of course there's no elevated train in contemporary Manhattan.
Initially, I think the train sequence was probably the most daunting because it was the most fleshed out in the script, and it was easy to see and to be able to read between the lines early on that there was going to be a lot of CGI work involved. The train sequence was one that immediately jumped out at everybody as something that was very large that we may not have enough time to finish if we didn't start on it right away.
It became clear early on in the design of the train sequence that we were going to need a lot more than just plates from New York with trains added. We decided the quantity of work dictated that we should probably shoot some real trains somewhere. And research brought us to the Loop in Chicago, which has contemporary high-rise buildings, which has an elevated train, and it's not altogether that different than the kinds of cars that would have or could have run on tracks for an elevated train in Manhattan.
We got on board really early just trying to plan the logistics of that and trying to determine how one might take Chicago footage, blend it with New York footage, blend it with CGI buildings and atmosphere and street elements and that sort of thing to put together a scene that played as if it was shot in New York or was taking place entirely in New York.
So we went to Chicago, and it did a lot of things for us. One is it gave us incredibly good reference for railroad tracks, what the trains looked like, how they moved, all of the things that we need to have to create those same items from scratch. But we put 16 cameras on a railroad car And that was our train. We drove it around the loop. There were other trains on the loop. We had our own conductor and everything, and we drove this elevated train, bristling cameras around and around and around. Those plates became backgrounds for running shots, where there's images outside the windows, images across the top of the car where the camera has limited motion. We did a spider cam shot using a real Chicago train, a real stretch of Chicago street, where the camera starts out close on the characters and pulls back to reveal the train pulling away. So we got as much of the material as we felt could be gotten in the Chicago environment, and that kept us from having to create all those buildings and all those trains and all those tracks for those shots.
The train sequence is fairly difficult because you're always trying to get the right direction, get a good plate that matches. Sometimes it's a completely CG shot, but wherever you can, you use a real train, that was set on rockers and different things that the mechanical effects guys would put together to make the train shake like a real train.
There's lots of stuff in the train sequence where there's combinations of CGI characters with live action train. Some cases there's live action characters shot blue screen on top of CGI train with a live background or a CGI background. So it's like a giant mix and match.
Certainly when they're fighting on the side of the train, that was difficult in the sense of trying to have laws of physics of gravity apply to them. Even if their feet can stick, they're going to be affected by gravity. And this shot definitely involved a lot of trying to get the exact right feel of how gravity would affect that. The right strength and look in the tentacles and everything else it's a big job. It's a big job. It was one of the more difficult sequences.
We knew we had to have a convincing CG version of Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. So the first thing we started with was the tentacles. And we worked with the company Edge Effects, who was building the practical puppeteer tentacle. And we took their model and scanned it and looked closely at what was going on with the shading and surface textures of their real model. And we replicated that in CG.
Certainly the tentacles themselves presented a problem because I think they're unique, and I don't think that there's anything in nature. There are things maybe close, but nothing really substantial to give some sort of reference to go off of.
Every shot that had tentacles in was a decision about whether to use puppets or to use an animated tentacle. What we did was on the day while we were shooting, if it was a shot we thought we could do puppets, we'd try it, we'd go for it. We'd put him in there, hook Doc Ock up to a harness, which was pretty heavy, have him go through his actions, and if it worked, it was great, we got it in the can, we moved on. In some cases we said, hey, it's going to take too long to set up, let's get a CG version. The other thing, there were some shots were just from the get-go we knew had to be CG. Biggest lesson I think we learned on Spider-Man 2 was just to be prepared to recreate a lot of different environments and a lot of performances later.
I guess basically that you can never have enough preparation. I mean, the terrible thing is that the work always expands to fill the time given to do something. But what I've learned is, with the riches of being able to do anything, one of the things that you have to do is you have to be real specific about what you want to do. Because if you're not careful, you can execute a bunch of mediocre stuff, and you can do it really quickly, and lots of it, right? So what you really have to do is pick out those moments where you can craft something, so it sets itself apart. That's the kind of stuff that you need to focus on. That's what I learned that's where I want to focus, on creating those moments.
One of the toughest things in doing these stories is coming up with villains. The hero is easy. Once you've created the hero, you've got him, and you use him in every story, and you know him. But you've got to come up with a new villain in almost every issue.
There's a long history in the annals of literature and entertainment of bad guys who are wonderfully attractive in various ways.
If you think that Spider-Man is the geek gone good, Octavius is the geek gone bad.
I wanted a scientist and I thought the name Otto Octavius sounded pretty good for a scientist. So I wrote that down. Then I said, well, if his name is Octavius, and I had him working on radioactive material, and that can be very dangerous. So there was a big glass shield, and he would work outside with little tentacles, and they would operate the radioactive material, and the glass shielded him from the radioactivity. But those looked like tentacles, so I thought his name is Octavius. Maybe I'll have all the students call him Dr. Octopus.
He's a wonderful character. He is so offbeat. I mean, the fact that he's a scientist, and he was a little dumpy when we were doing him. We made him a little bit overweight. He was more like an Edward G. Robinson type, with a little girth. And it was certainly a very distinctive kind of character.
Here's a guy who wasn't out to rule the world or anything like that, but he had these tentacles grafted onto him accidentally. He could climb up the wall of a building with him. He could crush things. So he was a worthy adversary for Spider-Man, which is a hard thing to find.
Doc Ock is arguably, it's got to be 1 and 2 with the Green Goblin, and it also depends on what era we're talking about. If you're talking about 60s, it's definitely Green Goblin. If you're talking about the 90s and you're talking about a character like Venom or Carnage, a whole different sort of breed of villain that came up. But I would say arguably when it comes to classics and in the long haul, it's Green Goblin and Doc Ock neck to neck.
When you create a character, you want to make it as different from the normal as possible so that he's distinctive. If you see a silhouette in the dark, you know who it is. That's the way to define characters. He was just a crazy old man. Originally, who went nuts, and his scientific ability made him angry, and then he became greedy. But we gave him dimension, and that was a residue of continuity and bringing up new angles on a person the second and third time around.
There is sort of the father-son relationship with Peter, but I think what really makes Doc Ock very, very cool is the fact that his upbringing, his life, is very, very similar to Peter Parker's.
Here was someone who also received extraordinary abilities by way of the prosthetic arms, who also had a choice to make. And I think that they recognize that about each other, and that's part of the dynamic between them.
And to me, that sometimes makes for the best villains, because they're almost exactly the same person as the hero, except one deviated left, one deviated right, and it's just a slight turn.
And I think Octavius would like to have been recognized for what he was and what he did. And the more he fights to be recognized, and the more he fights for some measure of credibility, taking the wrong tactics and doing so, the worse the world looks at him, the more determined he gets. So it's this really bad cycle of constant revenge and the longing for appreciation.
And before you know it, life takes you into interesting places, and that's and then when these two characters, collide together, it makes for some great fireworks.
We set our minds on Doc Ock from the get-go. There's really, I think there was a 2-second conversation about maybe a Goblin continuity, or it was too early to go there and wasn't really interesting enough at this point. Doc Ock is fantastic, but what do you do with Doc Ock? How do you develop this character?
In the casting of Alfred Molina, you start with someone who's immensely likable. And that's what you want in any great villain, is you want him to be a human being who has dreams and desires and flaws, and he gets carried away in the service of something that he thinks is positive. It is ultimately his own hubris.
Please welcome our very own Dr. Octavius, Alfred Molina.
When I got the job, I started checking out some back copies and, realized that, in fact, Doc Ock changed his look very much over the years, as depending on who was drawing him. But the one thing that was very, very constant in the characterization of Doc Ock, all the way through the various stories from the mid-60s right through to now, was that he always had a really kind of good sense of humor. There was always something a bit kind of sharp and intelligent about him. He wasn't just a kind of brutal bad guy. So he wasn't just, he kind of had a bit of class to him, I like that. I suppose one anxiety I may have had at the beginning was how much of this was going to be an actor's job and how much of it was going to be essentially was I just going to be a cog in a much, much bigger machine. But as we started work, I realized, of course, that Sam never loses sight of the human elements in the job. I mean, he's not one of those directors that suddenly gets completely obsessed with the technical stuff and the special effects and the CG and all that stuff, and then completely forgets about the flesh and blood that's in there.
Doc Ock, to make him the way we are making him for this movie, is a very complicated process. It's probably one of the more challenging characters.
Neil Spisak, the production designer, and John Dykstra, the visual effects designer, and myself kind of worked together on developing the image of Doc Ock.
From the beginning, we put one of our production assistants, Aaron Scully, in kind of a harness with normal, I think they're like washer and dryer black tubes coming out of him.
You know, a guy standing in the middle of a room with dryer hoses coming off of him. Just to start talking about something as wacky as, you know, the guy has 4 arms growing out of his back. So talking about proportion and length and balance and what would he have to do in order to walk and how would he get up on his haunches and just the sort of things that you would think are simple take a great deal of thought.
This is a great short length, and they can even be shorter. Of course, and I don't think we have to mock up anything shorter right now. Because we know that they're going to eventually, in the story, through CG, fold up, collapse, and become part of his back situation. This one looks small to me, this claw.
Yeah. It was just yeah. I mean, we did this last night and this morning.
This one
just to get the length.
This one looks, maybe it's a little too big, maybe somewhere in the middle, as far as the victim a cat. Although I'd love to grab somebody by the head. Yeah. Maybe we need bigger feet on lower ones and smaller feet on top ones. But I'm afraid if we have big feet on the top ones, we won't have the dexterous quality we've been talking about.
We looked at the first illustration of Doc Ock, and it kind of had a very crude look to it. And we wanted that to be a little bit more sophisticated, and where it would look like it was built for a specific purpose of a very fine mechanical instrumentation or movement or something that would be used in a lab, which that first one didn't kind of give off that appeal to.
The one person that I need to acknowledge hugely is the illustrator that I worked with in London called Paul Catling. And he and I worked together in London and then brought our drawings to the table here in Los Angeles, and they were much liked.
The original drawing of Paul Catling's is the one that everyone gravitated to in terms of style and feel. And actually, I think the end ended up not exactly that, but there were a lot of things that were similar to that drawing.
There was a decision right at the beginning that the actor and the director wanted practical puppets to work with so that when they were intimate, if the tentacle was picking up a cigar and putting it in Doc Ock's mouth and then lighting it with a match, they could do that with puppets in close with the puppeteers off screen so that one, the actor had the tentacles to interact with, to perform with, and two, we didn't have to make CG tentacles for every single shot. Plus, it gave the director real things to interact with.
The faster snap works for me. Okay. Snap and open, quick.
Okay. Something like a two-shot of what he said.
Ready and action.
As we went further forward, John Dykstra, with his responsibilities for the computer design, and Neil Spisak with his responsibilities for every set on the movie, gradually it was left to the costume designer to kind of follow it through. So I've had this wonderful chance to work with model makers and engineers and robotic experts and all these wonderful people at Edge Effects, Steve Johnson's company.
When we first got the call for it, it was like, wow, Spider-Man 2, that's going to be a really big hit. What an honor. How cool is that? But then the reality of it hit that this is going to be probably the most difficult thing we've ever done, and it probably was. It wasn't like I read the script and thought this stuff is pretty difficult. This is going to be a really, really big challenge because there was no script. There was no script until months into preparation. So that actually was probably one of the more daunting aspects of it. We literally started building, designing, and basically kind of just guessing what we might need for this character to film this movie.
We prototyped everything. We didn't really have a blueprint of the vertebrae of each tentacle should be this size, the tentacle should be this long. We kind of just made it up as we went along and did pass after pass after pass and got approval from the production as we kept going, and we kept doing it that way.
There's various stages. There's the corset, which has to be worn basically for protection. Then on top of that goes what we call the girdle, which is what the tentacles are attached to. And that girdle is in two parts. There's the back girdle and the front girdle. We've got the big metal version, we've got a rubberized version. Then we've got other things like there's the big spine, this kind of spine. The tentacles, when all four of them are on, the whole thing weighs about 100 pounds.
At the initial phases of design, there were lists of things the tentacles had to be able to do. And it was just a challenge, a huge challenge.
I knew that the performance would be what would make or break these pieces. So we hired from the very beginning, even the beginning of the test phases and the design phases, we hired a contingent of puppeteers here at the studio so that we could work out the performance and the attitude and the character of these tentacles along with how we were going to build them and how the animatronic functions would work.
Eric Hayden was the lead puppeteer, and also, as very fortunately enough, was the person who was in charge of the shop as all the research and development was taking place. So at Edge Effects, Eric Hayden was there from the initial meeting of how it was going to be put together to actually getting stuff on film and controlling the movement of the puppets, determining the movement, directing the puppeteers, and working with puppeteers in a very strong way.
Before tentacles even were made, we had created these foam rubber tentacles that were held up by sticks and manipulated and had wooden claws that opened and closed, nothing else. And we did a test shoot where we blacked out a room and the puppeteers wore black, and they operated these tentacles attached to a stand-in actor. And man, it looked cool. I can't pick out one shot in particular that really worked. It was just the simple fact that the puppeteers disappeared into the background. These things were alive, and they were doing stuff. They were grabbing objects and putting them in places, and they were four separate entities attached to this one man. And I think everyone at that point felt, you know what, this is going to work. The controlling mechanisms that operate the Death Flower would normally necessitate up to 3 people to operate one claw. Well, we needed to square down our footprint on set so we didn't have 20 million puppeteers on set. And we generated what we call the throne, which is this controlling chair that an operator can ride in, and his feet operate some of the jaw articulation, and his hands can operate, and that means that we get everything pared down into one efficient throne.
The design of the Death Flower was arrived at due obviously to a lot of different considerations, but the main thing that we were looking for was ability to express a lot of different kind of emotions or moods or whatever, ranging from a kind of an attack mode, which can get into something like this, to a kind of a wounded mode, which is something like that, to a kind of aggressive or focused mood, which is something like this. There are a lot of different permutations of that. That's something we call a ball, which would theoretically be for like punching through walls, things of that nature. So the design process of the movement of the Death Flower went through a lot of different iterations, but basically once the kind of trilaterally symmetrical concept was agreed on and the segmented leaves of the flowers, of the fingers, I set about basically trying to make, to design the joints for sort of maximum movement and expressibility
So we really had two companies here under one roof. We had the performance aspect and the engineering aspect going along, following simultaneous paths. And that actually really, really helped when it came down to getting on set and Sam being able to direct these things. Because truly that's what it was. Sam was directing these tentacles like a character.
In peak performance, with all 4 tentacles going simultaneously, there were 16 puppeteers working. Each puppeteer had a very specific job. Each tentacle takes 4 people to operate. Action. The performance relationship between what our team of puppeteers did in relation to what Alfred did on set, in terms of his movements being led by our movements or our movements being led by his movements, started off in a very slow and careful rehearsal environment of pacing it out. What does it feel like to make this 8-foot-long arm strike from your back and look like it's coordinated from your own muscles? So that it started off almost as a movement exercise, trying to marry the movements of all the people involved in making that tentacle strike.
We realized, of course, that this was a crucial and integral part of the characterization. And we had lots of long and detailed rehearsals with the puppetry team.
And if at any time you ever feel, it's totally safe to touch it or play with it or anything.
That's cool.
Go. 3, 2, 1, strike! Cool. Ready, and go. And on go, we're going to look to the right. Ready, and go. How does that feel, Fred? And
yeah, a lot better.
And go.
A lot better.
Okay, cool.
1, 2, 3, right there. 4, 5, right there. 5.
Okay,
yeah, those
so
last couple.
Exactly. So
last couple of steps, it's like I'm being held back.
Okay.
We tried to make the tentacles practical whenever we could, because clearly that was always the most effective way of doing it. When they're real, they're real. There's no 2 ways about it. But there are certain shots that obviously that can't be done, and so we had to have them CG'd in at a later date, and I had to kind of like mime them in a way. I imagined they were there.
One of the things that's tough about the character Doc Ock is to make him perambulate. Walking on his own feet is one thing, and he has to act as though he's carrying 60 pounds of tentacles. When he's wearing the puppets, he is carrying 60 pounds of tentacles, so that's not too tough. When we take the tentacles away, the practical ones, and we start making virtual tentacles, his weight is supported by those tentacles. He's carried by those tentacles. So we've made a device that actually harnesses to him and moves him through space as if the tentacles were supporting him, and that's the Doc Ock walk rig. Doc Ock walk rig. There's bound to be a toy in that someplace.
It's on a track, and it flew like 20 feet above him, and all these wires hooked to him, and through a computer, we were able to pull the wires in different ways, and it was just like a computerized. We were the puppet masters.
Peter Parker and the girlfriend.
Apart from it being a bit tedious and sometimes difficult, I quite enjoyed the technicalities of it. I quite enjoyed the technical problems that had to be solved. I enjoyed being part of that process.
It's a funny thing. Most comic book movies kill off the villains. In the comic books, I rarely, if ever, did that. I was more miserly. I didn't want to get rid of a good villain. I wanted to save him and use him again.
I mean, how many times have you seen the villain sort of fall off a cliff and we sort of look over, he's gone, it must be dead, only to return a year or 2 later. I mean, it's a hallmark of storytelling, especially heroic style storytelling.
Readers and audiences build up a feeling for the characters, if they're heroes or villains, and it's always fun to see them again.